needs to consider this in any kinds of plans for the future. We just had an election, which is going to devastate us all, but it's one of the things that's going to devastate us is the undermining of all regulations that could potentially avoid some of the terrible consequences that already are underway, and that will affect, among other things, regulations to protect the environment, what we call the environment. And I think Carrboro needs to be forward-thinking, especially in light of those federal changes. I want to end by saying we call what we're experiencing a climate crisis. In my view, that's inadequate. We're undergoing the 6th extinction on the planet. There are biodiversity issues as well as climate issues that we have to face, and I really would like to see Carrboro taking the lead in thinking through and learning about those issues in any plans that it has. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Weiner. Ms. Flynn, come on up. Weiner, yes. Welcome.
Hi, and thank you. My name is Renee Flam. I live on Rock Spring Court. I want to speak to two things: the need for affordable housing and how to dialogue about it. Many people in the community who are aware of the Summit Report conclusions are shocked, as I am, that the town is still considering spending more money exploring this possibility, given the cost and damage it will involve. Maybe I wouldn't be if there were more genuine and meaningful communications from the town. It would help if Carrboro would acknowledge that they understand the concerns people are having, as these are not small. Instead, we get responses that seem more political in nature, which is unfortunate, given the state of the country now. We need to create more affordable housing, so it seems it would be given that a primary goal would be to make sure that those who are already living here are still able to afford it. I'm a social worker. I moved to Carrboro about 20 years ago. My house cost $179,000. It was affordable to me then. There's no way I could buy a house here now, my house. Let's see, I've recently spent about $10,000 on repairs and mitigating stormwater damage around my house. It is only appropriate for me to want the town to be considering how other properties will be affected by the development. Can you imagine if you were living closest to the lowest point in the town where so much development was taking place uphill from your house, and that the town was considering breaking bedrock nearby? It just makes sense to be worried, really. If you were me, what would you do? I would really like to hear that, and would love to hear from anybody if they could make some suggestions about that, because I'd like to think about it differently, but it's very scary to me. Again, affordable housing needs to be available. I'm wondering if other ideas have been explored, like scaling back units on the Pathway project to accommodate the surrounding neighborhoods' needs in terms of protecting their homes. There are many alternative models being successfully executed in towns and cities across the country that aren't as costly and without such a risky and damaging trade-off. When I was talking to a council member, I asked what would happen if this project were to be completed, and some of my concerns came to fruition, and I could not afford to fix whatever needed fixing. I was told that there would be mechanisms in place to deal with this. When I asked, I don't think either one of us knew what mechanisms were. When I asked what if the mechanisms did not help or were not in place, I was told that one option would be to sue the town. How does this help me believe that the town is taking my concerns seriously? If you do not already know, please educate yourself on the history of how the council has voted on very big decisions before consulting the community in any meaningful way. The history of short-sighted decision-making that Carrboro has made when it comes to taking the surrounding environment into consideration when building. Mitigation efforts that have been promised and abandoned or not considered at all, in addition to other problems that only become the property owner's issue after that. Please talk to experts who live right here that have a wealth of information and wisdom to share, and then please communicate in a more genuine fashion what the town is learning about the current situation, as I know great efforts have been made to try and share concerns with you. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Flynn. That ends public comment as it relates to who I have signed up this evening. we will move right into our consent agenda. But before we move into the consent agenda, Town Manager Tony, I wanted to make a quick inquiry, and maybe you don't have the answer tonight, about next steps from town staff about this item, if you have any information about that to share this evening.
Around affordable housing.
Yeah, this right here, what we've been hearing public comment about.
Well, I think the next step is we've heard from the community. We have a report. We would need to look at, is this feasible to do on this site? We also, as a staff, a team, need to look at other creative opportunities in town for affordable housing opportunities. So the next step would be to pause right now on pathway and come back with a clear recommendation whether we should move forward or not on pathway, and also provide some recommendations on other options for affordable housing in the community. That we anticipate being done at a work session early in the year.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you for sharing that information. I'll let community members go ahead and head out that would like to.
Kick everybody out with your statement. Let them relieve themselves.
Thank you.
Let a little bit of angst off. Good job by the mayor to get her to be the census.
Okay, so we're down to the consent agenda, and items on the consent agenda are a part of our normal town business. There will be no discussion of these items unless a council member requests to pull an item, after which the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered individually. All other items not removed from the consent agenda will be adopted by a single motion. We do have 14 items on the consent agenda this evening. It is my understanding that council members do not have any items that they want to pull. I do believe Town Manager Tony has, or other staff members have responded to questions. I see Mayor Pro Tem now staring intently at the left side of my face. Is it for the motion?
It didn't mean to be, but I'm happy to move the consent agenda.
Yeah, thank you so
I'll
much.
second.
Yeah, thank you. So it's been moved and properly seconded for these 14 items on the consent agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Consent agenda is complete. Thank you, council members. And, I'm sorry. 1 second. So we are down to our public hearing. I am going to ask our town attorney, Mr. Nick Herman, to give us some information about the quasi-judicial nature of this public hearing for everyone's understanding and what we can expect, because it is different from legislative. Mr. Herman.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. What I'm going to summarize for you is sort of a reminder, but as the mayor said, it's also for the benefit of any of those people who are watching or any people that may be testifying in this matter. As you know, this is a quasi-judicial hearing, which means that the council must decide the matter before it, the special use permit, solely based on the evidence that you hear here tonight. That will mean that before anyone provides any testimony, and that includes the staff, they will have to be sworn. So we need to remember to do that. Some of you may have received some emails from folks about this matter, from citizens. And I am saying to you that you should disregard those emails if you got any, and when you can remember, just forward them to the clerk. But that's consistent with the rule that the only thing you're able to consider in deciding the special use permit is what you hear tonight in this room. You should know that with regard to the evidence that you receive, the technical rules of evidence that we have in court don't apply. If you have a question in your own mind about the competency or relevancy of particular evidence that you're listening to, you are the ones individually to judge whether what you're hearing is sufficiently reliable and relevant to you in making a decision. I do want to say to you that by statute, you are prohibited from considering lay testimony about three things. You are prohibited from considering lay opinions about whether the use of the property affects the value of property. You are prohibited from hearing or considering lay opinions about whether an increase in vehicular traffic resulting from the development poses a danger to the public safety. And you are prohibited from considering any lay opinion testimony about matters that ordinarily would be required to have expert testimony in our courts. Like what? If someone, a lay person, wants to talk about stormwater impacts, that is a matter for expert testimony, not lay opinion testimony. If someone wants to talk about engineering stuff, that is a subject matter for expert testimony, not ordinary citizen lay testimony. So I caution you about that. That is you cannot consider that even if it comes to pass that some folks who are lay persons might render opinions about those matters. Only experts can testify about that. Ultimately, and the staff will talk to you a little bit about this when it's their turn to present, but ultimately, you will be required, this is by statute and by ordinance, you are required ultimately to grant the special use permit before you unless you conclude that the development will either materially endanger the health or safety or will substantially injure the value of adjoining property or will not be in harmony in the area in which the development is to be located, or if the development as proposed is not in conformity with the comprehensive plan, yet land use plan, traffic plans, and other plans that the council has adopted. So only if you are to find one of those four things, if you don't find any of them, then you are duty bound to grant the special use permit. And that's not me talking, that's a statutory and ordinance requirement. You are, however, the final thing here, you are permitted in approving a special use permit to establish certain appropriate and reasonable conditions upon the permit as they may relate to advancing the interests of the health, safety, and welfare and advancing the legitimate objectives of the land use ordinance and which conditions are not in conflict with the land use ordinance. So you are permitted to add reasonable conditions to a permit if you chose to grant one. I will say that after the hearing, the evidentiary hearing is closed by the mayor then the council has the prerogative under the mayor's leadership to deliberate about the matter. And then if it wishes to adopt a motion to instruct the staff to come back to you with a written decision in accordance with how you instruct the staff. And then you will review and adopt that written decision with any edits as you might make at a business meeting in January. Okay, anyone have any questions?
Councilmember Posada.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Nick, for that explanation. I think it's important not only for us on this side of the dais, but also folks watching at home, because I think there's, I don't know if we've had this level of presentation before we get into the conversation, so I'm glad that we did this tonight. And just to tease this out a little bit, right, because there's a couple of things that I want to make sure that everyone at home also understands. You mentioned out of the reasons that we can decide to not allow this permit is one of them was property values of adjacent, and then but also when you talked about what we can't consider, you talked about lay persons, right? Can you tease that up a little bit more, right? Because for folks watching at home, they heard you say you can't consider this from a layperson, but this is also something that you have to consider, or it could be a reason to deny the permit. Can you dive a little bit deeper into that so that folks at home can tease it out?
Yeah, it's possible in a case like this, or actually it's probably likely, that there may be testimony about, well, there is likely to be testimony, for example, as to whether or not the development as proposed will adversely affect the value of adjoining or abutting properties, okay? And what I was saying is that by statute, the only testimony you can consider about that would come from an expert, such as an appraiser. I mean, you may hear it. A layperson could get up here and start saying it's going to affect my property values. But that's a layperson. You're not necessarily, you don't necessarily have to cut them off, right? But I am telling you that by statute, you cannot consider that evidence. You would have to hear from an expert, and typically an expert in that area is an appraiser, in order for you to consider that question. So that's one example, and I gave you, well, two others. The other is someone wants to talk about this is going to increase vehicular traffic, that poses a danger to the public safety. The only competent evidence that you can hear about that would have to be from an expert, someone with a skill, experience, training, and knowledge to render such an opinion. That's what we call an expert under the law. If you heard lay testimony about that, ordinary citizen testimony, you would have to disregard it. You're required by statute to disregard that. Does that help?
That definitely does. Thank you so much, Nick.
Okay. Anything
Mayor.
further? Thank you. Is that
Yeah,
right?
thank you, Mr. Herman.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing, and we will hear first from town staff, Mr. Marty,
Yes, ma'am.
and then the applicant.
Yeah, and you will need to swear witnesses.
So,
You will need to be sworn as
oh,
well.
by Mr.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Both Marty and anyone who's now coming before you, we can do it en masse, would need to
Be sworn
affirm
in.
to tell the truth and the whole truth.
Thank you, Mr. Herman.
Marty, do you mind? Is there anybody else that will be participating in the
Chad.
conversation? If y'all don't mind, if y'all could come to the area over here.
This is all, everybody that's going to be sworn in at one time that's
Yes,
planning on
yes.
giving any
If I can
kind
get
of-
you to raise your right hand, and after I read the affirmation, will y'all just say "I do"? Okay. Is there anybody else before we complete this process? Do you swear or affirm that the evidence that you are about to provide is the truth to the best of your knowledge? I do.
Thank you, Mr. Joyner. Mr. Marty, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I have a relatively quick presentation, and I'll just go ahead and jump right in. Special use permit, as you've heard, regarding the Newberry Architecturally Integrated Subdivision Project at 904 Homestead Road. I have a vicinity map here just showing that there are 3 parcels involved. Is the mouse working? Okay, there it is. Yes. 3 parcels involved, assembled for the subdivision. I have a full set of plans and GIS if you want to zoom in on any of this. This is just a reference map, really. Aerial view of the property from Homestead Road. View of the property from the adjacent subdivision, the terminus of Lucas Lane. And an aerial view of the property with the aerial imagery turned on here. And just some general information. Town Council did conditionally rezone the property to R3CZ with a range of units approved along with other conditions. Again, the 3 parcels total about 9.7 acres. There are 36 lots in total proposed. Of those lots, 24 are for single family, 12 are for duplexes, and they're also asking for allowance of up to 10 accessory dwelling units. 5 total size limited homes and payment to the town of an amount equal to 1 affordable housing payment in lieu. That affordable housing payment in lieu was a rezoning condition, so that is required by the rezoning. Staff has concluded that the project the plans comply with the land use ordinance subject to the proposed list of conditions included in the staff report, and I have those available to share later if you'd like to look at them. I also have here, just for reference, if you want to talk about any particular rezoning conditions, I have those available here. And then I'm just going to walk through quickly the site plan, a couple of the plan sheets. I'm not going to go through every single one, but just to give you a sense of what's involved here. Homestead Road is down on the south side of this slide. The main entrance is off of Homestead Road right here. And then you turn to the right and go to Lucas Lane. This is the image I showed you earlier. This is the connection point of that image I showed. And then off to the north, you have a road terminating up here on the north side of the site. These are the single-family lots. There's one single-family lot here, and then all of the duplexes are going north to south in this direction. Recreation and open space plan. The ordinance does call for and require at least 40% open space. The subdivision as designed does exceed that, primarily within the stream buffer encumbered areas, as well as a little bit of additional land, but it's primarily the stream buffer areas. And the Homestead Road buffer, which you can see outlined in, it's a little faint, but it's in orange here. I have a zoomed in excerpt here of the playfield. This is up in the northeast corner of the site. As you see, there's a trail around kind of the perimeter of this, which counts as a recreation facility. The playfield itself, by ordinance, is a minimum of 20,000 square feet in size. What they are asking for is a partially cleared playfield area, which you can see generally where I have the cursor here. Oh. And then for a portion of it to be the term used in the plan and has been used in other projects as a naturalized play area, where they would clear out scrub trees, small vegetation, in order to make it a functional area where you could throw a frisbee or run around, play a sport in general. But as you're seeing the trees here, leave the mature trees in place rather than clear cutting the entire 20,000 square feet. So I just wanted to pull an excerpt out there and explain a little bit more, in a little more detail, what's proposed there. The grading and stormwater plan, as you see here with kind of the bold lines, there are 2 large bioretention type facilities as SEM, stormwater control measures, one on the backside of the single family lots here, and then another in the southeast corner of the lot below the additional single family lots here. Oops. We do have the town engineer here if you have any questions of the town engineer. and the consulting engineer from the applicant is here as well. With that, again, I do have the full set of plans if you want to dive in and go into more detail on any particular plan sheets or topics. And otherwise, I have available the staff recommendations excerpted here in hopefully a large enough font to be able to read them. And following the staff recommendations, there are 15 in total from the staff. We have some comments from the Affordable Housing Advisory Commission, Transportation, Mobility, and Greenways Advisory Commission, the recently consolidated commission, and the Stormwater Advisory Commission. They have a chart here at the end. I'm happy to answer questions. Again, the Zins may want to follow me with some commentary, and I know they have someone here to provide some testimony as well. And Nick referenced the standards by which you have to judge the project. I just have those here available at the end when you get to that point if you want to read the actual standards that Nick was referencing. And I'll leave it at that, see if you have any questions for me, and otherwise we'll invite the Zins up.
Thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Martin?
Madam Mayor? I have one
Do you want to
question
ask
for
a question now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr., just one question before we get started. Did the town staff make an assessment of the relative safety of the roll curb design versus the typical curb design? I ask because it's in condition 3.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that. That is a finding that council has to make as a part of, assuming you get to the point of approving or denying. The way the ordinance is written, it is up to the permit issuing authority, that is you guys, to find that that is okay. What we have historically done in a situation where the ordinance allows for one or the other is turn to the appropriate party on staff as our subject matter expert, in this case, the Public Works Director. Mr. Ballinger did find that it was an acceptable application in this subdivision. He was not available tonight, so I know Assistant Director Berger is here if you want to talk directly to Public Works about it. But the Public Works Director did indicate that he was okay with it.
That's my question.
Any more questions from anyone? Yeah, that's it, Marty.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Zinn, Omar, or Adam, or both? Welcome.
Thank you. Good to see you guys. I like the new setup. My name's Omar Zinn. I'm here with my brother Adam Zinn tonight, representing Parker Lewis. We're local home builders and developers. We grew up right behind Lake Hogan Farms off Homestead Road, off Old 86. And approximately 2.5 years ago, we first brought this project forth with the intention of rezoning it, which we did. I have a neighborhood meeting copy of August of 22 that I brought with me tonight, and we started this project a few months before that. To not really belabor the point which Marty has made, but to reiterate a few facts about Newberry. Newberry's 9.7 acres. It's over 50% open space, 36 units with a possibility of 10 ADUs. Previously, this land was part of what was approved years ago, a project called Litchfield. Litchfield was a larger project with fewer lots, but they found it financially unfeasible. They sold off several lots, and we brought these 3 lots to combine to 9.7 acres. Going along with Carrboro's desires for density along primary transportation corridors, we went through a rezoning. We first presented several different plans. One plan at the suggestion of council member Susan Romaine of even more dense project for what you're seeing here today, approximately 70 plus units. There was a lot of neighbor and community pushback, so we went with the more conservative 36 units that you see here today. The project does include a car charging station as required by the current LUO. It does include connectivity to Claremont, which we developed, almost 20 years ago. There's a play area, there's connective trails. We extend the Homestead Road sidewalk. It's compact and dense. And we do prefer the roll curb, as mentioned earlier, just because we feel that, well, I know from being the individual who's on site building the houses, that the roll curb will allow us to install curb without specifically installing a specific driveway location, only to rip it out and move it 5 or 7 feet to the left or right. So we're going to have a lot less waste. And a simple 6-inch thick concrete entry at all points. That's our idea and our goal for installing the roll curb. I am here tonight to answer any questions that anybody may have. We're also here with Chad Huffine, our engineer, as well.
No questions?
Sorry,
Oh,
Madam
wait.
Mayor. I apologize. Late breaking.
Councilmember Frey.
Took me a minute to get my thoughts together. Mr. Zinn, I do have one question about the area of the plan that's shown as the playfield. I've been out to the site, and that whole area is bamboo mostly by volume at the moment. Do you have a sense, I guess what I'd say is, does your plan include maintenance to keep the bamboo out of that area, or what does that look like in the future as you're designing this project?
I'll let Chad address part of that question, but I know that we're limited in terms of the grading that we can do in that area. As far as bamboo is concerned, I would have to check to see what is allowable in terms of removal before proceeding with any clearing there. Bamboo, as you know, you cut it and it grows right back. So that's not a question I can fully answer. I'd like to hear from town staff and Chad in terms of what's fully allowable.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, I yield back.
No other questions?
Thank you.
Mr. Zinn. Did you say that Mr. Chad was coming up maybe next? Welcome.
Mayor, members, thank you. Chad Huffine, for the record, 505 East Davis Street, Burlington, North Carolina, to try to answer the question about removing the river reed or bamboo materials. In the first segment of the buffer known as Zone 2, that material can be removed. As shown on the site plan, we'll be leaving some of the larger hardwood trees for shade in the naturalized play area. In Zone 1 of the buffer, where there's dead or nuisance material, or in an effort to maintain the 4-foot hand-cut trail, that material can be removed as well. So there will be removal of those nuisance materials. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We also have an appraiser here.
Okay. Come on up.
Sorry.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm John McFall. I've been an appraiser in the area since about 1981, and I was asked to do an analysis of the impact of Newberry subdivision on surrounding properties, and I did an analysis of that. Typically, in these situations, there's 3 forms of depreciation: physical, functional, and external. When somebody does something external, it's usually thought of as like a non-residential use next to residential uses that would impact the value. Since their plans are for homes, and I believe it's the 700 to 850 range, and all the homes in that same area have been selling for that, it doesn't appear that there would be any impact on the value of surrounding homes. And that's basically what I found. I concluded that there would be no impact to or diminution in value to surrounding properties.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I have a question. I think I have one for possibly Marty and possibly one for the representative of Public Works who is here.
Either
order.
Mr. Zinn, Omar, Are there others with your team, or have we heard from pretty much everyone? Okay, thank you. Marty, thank you for coming back.
Sure.
Mr. Roop, thank you. I have a question about how our ordinance calculates amenities. So can you walk me through the calculation that the play field is involved in?
Yes, do you mean the playfield in specifically versus other recreational amenities? Is that what you mean?
Feel free to include the other recreational amenities that
Yes.
are part of this plan, but the one I'm particularly interested in is the play field at the moment.
Okay. The ordinance mandates a minimum of 20,000 square feet. The language, as you read it, indicates, relatively flat and, able to play a sport of some sort. Carrboro does have a precedent through past councils and past projects of approving what the term we've used as naturalized playfield to leave some mature trees in place. But the 20,000 is the minimum. There's a 400 square foot requirement per home, and if you do the math, 36 units times 400, you come up, I know I did the math, it's something just under 20,000. So essentially you end up with a 20,000 requirement here. Maybe there'll be further discussion this evening about this matter. Council should not feel that that you're obligated or required to approve a naturalized playfield. You could say you think there needs to be more cleared area or something, for lack of a better way to put it, better or different. Did you want to share something, Chad? Oh, okay, thanks. I'm okay for now. The other amenities, the walking trails, I believe there's a gazebo. That's what Chad was just showing me. I know it is outlined, and I can bring up the plans if you want to look at it in greater detail. Each individual unit has a recreation point requirement, so it's 10.79 if my memory is right for single-family homes. The duplexes are the same calculating factor, 10.79 points. So you take your 36 homes, multiply it by the 10.79, and you end up with somewhere between 300 and 400, or maybe a little more than 400. I'm not remembering the exact number. And there's a chart on the plans that shows how much each amenity gets in terms of the number of points. The last thing I'll say about it is there is typically a 10% requirement or recommendation. It's not an absolute requirement for facilities aimed towards young children. So there's a swing set here and something else. They might correct me, but I know that those are the ones aimed towards children. Is that helpful?
Thank you, Mr. I'm not quite done asking, though. So what fraction of the square footage requirements met by this naturalized play space?
I believe
round numbers are just fine.
Yeah, Chad can correct me if I get this wrong, but I believe about 2/3 of it is cleared and 1/3 is naturalized. Although I may have those reversed, Chad, if you'll help me out if I have that reversed.
Okay.
Would you like it pulled up? Does that make it easier? Maybe pull up the
Yes.
pull it up, Marty.
Yep, I've got it on a screen over here, but it would be great for everyone to be able to see it.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think that would be helpful. Thanks.
That'll do the trick. Thank you. Mr. Roop, a further question. What is the requirement in our ordinance for an amenity that counts towards that set, whether it's as square footage or as amenity points? What are the requirements for maintaining that as an amenity?
The field or any of the amenities,
Mm-hmm.
yes. The ordinance essentially requires that the HOA maintain that over time. The developer has to leave it in such a condition that we, upon doing what we would call a zoning final, go out and check the site and make sure it is left in good shape, similar to how we do stormwater control measures involving the town engineer having, as-built certification drawings and that kind of thing. For something like a playfield, it's more of a visual check and the swing set, make sure the swing set's there and is equal or better than what was represented in the plans. So, is that helpful?
It is. What happens if the HOA allows the play field to become overgrown with bamboo?
We have the authority as a staff to enforce in such a situation, which is to say, go to the HOA and communicate to them that it needs to be put back into the shape it was in, it was left in, essentially. So that's the long and short of that. I think we do have that authority. It's a condition, a term of the permit that's being issued.
Okay, thanks very much. I think my only remaining question, Madam Mayor, is for the representative of Public Works.
Okay. Councilmember Haven O'Donnell, is your question for Marty or while he's there?
I'm unsure.
Okay.
Hey, Marty. Let me ask, and then we can see. So my question has to do with the staff recommendation number 8 regarding stormwater system maintenance. And it says specifying a responsible entity and schedule. So I want to know a little bit more about that. And where it says the best management practices and development, performance, and evaluation, who's doing that and when does it get conveyed? Just some more specifics regarding the staff recommendation, please.
Sure. This is now embedded in the land use ordinance. In years past, we had some subdivisions where, as we were just discussing with respect to the recreational aspect of the development, it was always required that the HOA, that once the developer goes away, the HOA is the permit holder, and therefore they are responsible for all aspects of the development. With respect to stormwater infrastructure, we did actually put into the ordinance a few years back explicit requirements that reporting be done, and it goes now through our stormwater utility group. So each SEM, BMP is the term used here, they're interchangeable to some extent, is inventoried by our stormwater utility group. Inspections are done by the stormwater utility, and essentially this is just reinforcing that by way of a condition, so that if this was done, if a real estate attorney was doing a title search or something along those lines, they would perhaps stumble upon this and report to their client that, hey, you're moving into a place where you're going to have to do stormwater maintenance and things of that nature. Does that help?
It does. And so, so the stormwater management, the town's stormwater management acts as a guard, more or less, would you
Yes.
say?
Yes, they do their inspections, and the idea is that the devices will be kept maintained over time instead of falling into disrepair. Before we had a stormwater utility group in Carrboro, that was difficult for the standing staff to get out there and look at all these things. But now we do have a staff dedicated for that purpose. To that purpose.
All right, thank you for that, Marty, appreciate it. I'm good.
That was it. Councilmember Frey, you ready for? That was good, Marty. Thank you. We appreciate it. If we could get Mr. Bellinger? Berger? I'm not doing good with names tonight. Come on up to be sworn in.
How you doing, Keith? Do you swear or affirm that the evidence that you are about to provide is the truth to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Byrd, do you mind, I understand that this was reviewed by the director, but I'm hoping you can give us some context around how Public Works evaluates roll curb, particularly from a public safety perspective.
I can't speak to that exactly. Kevin was the main one kind of overlooking this project, and so I don't have a ton of information for you as far as that goes.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you so much. Was it a question for Mr. Berger? Jason?
But maybe more a general question. Is there anyone that can provide?
You can go ahead, Mr.
Yeah.
Berger.
Is
Take
there
a seat.
anyone available that can provide expert witness on the safety implications of the roll curb versus the
Oh,
standard curb?
right. What Councilmember Frey was asking.
Yeah,
Is there anyone available that can speak to that question? Oh,
Yeah, I guess that's my concern is the safety implications for pedestrians.
Well, can we show the public the difference?
Yeah.
I'm thinking,
I
some of us have some knowledge, and other folks who may be watching have no idea what the difference is that we're talking about.
And that's a decision point, I think, for the council, potentially, one of the conditions.
It's like, duh, what does it look like? Jargon.
I'm asking the consulting engineer about, there was a detailed drawing submitted to the Public Works Director for review. It is not actually in the plans yet, so I don't have it available to put on the screen, but I would like for the actual detail that Kevin Bellinger, as the director, reviewed to be our reference point tonight. And so I'm hoping we can find our way to that. I could pull up an image of rolled curb, but my memory, Chad, is that, and I would prefer you to come up and testify to yourself, but my memory was that it was the standard that Cary has in their ordinance. But can you speak to that, Chad?
Madam Mayor, if you can give me just a couple minutes recess so I can find the email conversation between myself and the Public Works Director. That way I can give you at least accurate visual of what you're looking at. But it's going to take me a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Here you go.
Looks like you have some help, Mr. Berger.
So that was the standard, and then here's your roll curve here.
So that detail, if you could give that to that IT person.
I'm going to go ahead and call a 5-minute recess. We'll come back. I was thinking about that earlier, but then I can't. So we are back. And there is our town clerk. It's coming in, and we will continue. We now have a visual.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Chad.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. Chad Huffine, civil engineering consultant for the applicant again. So on the screen, you have a visual that we submitted to Public Works in the request of the substitution or exchange for roll curb and standard curb. Top left corner of the image that you're looking at is a typical standard curb that's used throughout the town of Carrboro. On the second row, third image from left to right, is the roll curb profile. This is what you would see if you cut the curb like a sandwich with a knife. So you're looking at the section view of that concrete structure. The research that we've done leading up to tonight's case included conversations with a large area transportation engineering design firm and a municipality separate and apart from any in Orange County that has their own transportation engineer. The determination, the research that we've looked specific to safety as it relates to the profile or the section of roll curb and standard curb is virtually inconclusive at speeds typical to this neighborhood. In discussions with Public Works, we expect to have a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit. Although the curb profiles are obviously different and mountable, a little easier at the roll curb profile and a little more restrictive with the standard curb profile, the speeds are the main concern of all the traffic studies or incident studies pertaining to this question. So in my personal opinion, and having the experience in other municipalities, I can tell you that this is an accepted profile in many municipalities. We just haven't had a chance to use it in Carrboro yet. What we do see as a benefit is the savings in construction debris, the uncertainty for utilities, driveway, and tree interference during the construction process. And we believe that this will provide a significant reduction in concrete waste as we go through construction process. So with that, I would recommend that the town approve the condition and allow roll curb for this request.
Thank you, Mr. Chad. Council members. Any other questions for Mr. Chad?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I want to understand, and Chad, how does the landscaping work with the roll curb?
So the curb height, what you see on the right-hand side of the top image, so the top left image, the back side of the curb is 12 inches.
Mm-hmm.
The ground surface between the top of that curb and the sidewalk that runs parallel to it will be the exact same as it would be with roll curb.
So.
And it would be grass or trees.
Or tree. So, does this plan call for landscape trees in that, along that curb edge, that rolled curb edge?
This request specifically calls for trees in the public right-of-way. This is a whole separate item, but as a means to protect the longevity of the tree. Not necessarily the placement of the tree within the utility strip, or what we may call the devil strip in some conversations, but the sidewalk paralleling the curb, that location horizontally and vertically is independent of the profile of curb that you choose.
Okay. I'm good. I'm good.
Any other questions, comments for Mr. Chad? No. Okay. Not right now. Thank you. Did I hear Councilmember Frey or Merrill that you might want Marty to come back up? Marty, Mr. Marty?
I just had questions about the EV charging station. If you could kind of give us a little more detail on just kind of what the requirements or expectations are, why we've got kind of in this plan is drawn 2 random spots in the far north corner as opposed to, say, infrastructure to install chargers down the road at each residence, which seems like it would be more useful.
Yes, a number of years ago, Trish or Tina may be able to help me on the timeline here, but the town did put into our land use ordinance a requirement for EV charging. That is very straightforward with respect to commercial projects, you know, somewhere in the parking lot provided, which is generally speaking a common area where anyone can park. You identify your EV stations, charging infrastructure, and put it there. The ordinance did go further with respect to residential subdivisions to require when there's a, I think the minimum number of lots is 20, but don't hold me to that yet. But that when you reach a certain threshold with respect to a residential subdivision, that in your common area, somewhere in the common area, that you similarly provide infrastructure. The ordinance doesn't dictate exactly where. It's just in this case, the common area happens to be adjacent to the playfield area we've been discussing.
And again, maybe kind of a technical question that would, I guess, be up to us to deliberate whether or not we want to do this, but would it be at all possible to, instead of having, again, this kind of random two-station situation that's not attached to any residence, instead, you know, I mean, personally, I think it would be more meaningful to have infrastructure in place for each residence so that the resident could decide to install a charger down the road. Could we do that instead or in addition to these kind of two random charging stations?
Sure, thanks for the follow-up. As you were saying that, I realized I didn't really speak to that aspect of what you asked. So the ordinance does not currently require that. Whether that might be something that the developer is amenable to, you could certainly discuss with them, at least providing kind of the wiring, if not the infrastructure itself. With respect to the state building code, I don't know that you could absolutely require it, but as Town Attorney Nick Herman mentioned earlier, you can attach what are, you know, considered reasonable conditions. So I might suggest you might want to discuss that with the developer, see if they're amenable to it, you know.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Roop, I think this will be the last question from me for you tonight, so I'll let you sit down in just a second. So if you would orient me in the quasi-judicial process here for the SUPA, if the town council does not find the use of roll curb acceptable, or in other words, if we do not include condition 3 in the SUPA,
yes,
what is permissible under the ordinance at that point?
Thank you for asking. I didn't want to get in front of what Chad had to say, but I will offer as a reaction to your question. We did have the discussion with the developer, and you know, Chad may want to come up here and speak more to this, or Adam or Omar, but it's my understanding from speaking with Chad that they could revert to the standard curb, and that could be essentially handled during the construction plan process, that it's not going to break the project, so to speak, for lack of a better way to put that. Is that helpful?
Yes, that is helpful. Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions for Mr. Marty? Thank you, Marty.
Sure.
So there was nobody signed up for the public hearing from the general public. It appears to me that the conditions are at the center of our decision-making tonight. And if council doesn't need to hear from anyone else, we can just kind of start talking through that. Maybe starting with Councilmember Frey's thinking.
Madam Mayor, I have a procedural question. Are we closing the public hearing before or after we deliberate?
I think we can deliberate and then close the public hearing. We're not making a decision, but just trying to come to consensus about the conditions.
Well, in case anything comes up in your deliberations, then you have the public hearing open to be able to ask about that.
So it's fine for it to continue to be open as we discuss about the conditions. Thank you, Mr. Herman. Councilman Posada.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It just be, I know that you mentioned that no one signed up for the public hearing, but I do see members of the public who are interested in this issue and were not here when we first started, would you mind opening it up for folks in the public to sign up now?
If they want to be sworn.
If they want to see.
Yeah, if they want to be sworn, I mean, I'm not against that. I was just saying I didn't have anybody signed up on the sign-up sheet that I had in front of me. Certainly not against that, if anyone wants to come up and be sworn. Coming up, Ms. Mills.
We'll see.
Right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm that the evidence that you are about to provide is the truth to the best of your knowledge?
Hello, my name is April Mills. I live at 405 Jewel Drive. I've lived in this community for over 12 years. We love ours in-house. There's never been a question of that love for our neighborhood, the open community, our kids run and play. You all have visited our area. We appreciate your time. A lot of our issues have always been around stormwater, and a lot of our fears are still around stormwater, and that was what public open comment was around tonight with the other developments that are happening in our community. And so, you know, this HOA will transition and have the storm ownership of those ponds. And we're always worried about how that transfer has happened, how it came to us within our HOA. And so making sure that that surety bond is protecting those new neighbors is very helpful to them. You asked great questions around the playground, the trees that will all be required on the HOA to maintain those grounds. And, you know, they will have a fee and dues, and that cost will go into what it takes to live in that community. And that may make it unaffordable for certain individuals, depending on what those costs are around stormwater. So all I can do is just advocate for how important that infrastructure is and that how that is handed off to that HOA. And that's very valuable. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mills. Appreciate your comments. Is there anyone else? Okay. Council members. Is there a discussion still about the use of the roll-type curb, which is acceptable within the subdivision? Do we need Mr. Chad to come back up for any questions or clarifying comments, or have we heard what we need to hear in reference to that? Yeah, something.
I'm inclined to not find the condition acceptable. I would like for them to revert to the vertical curb.
Okay.
I think I take the points that are well-founded, that the speed is the primary consideration, and that the low speed, sort of in a certain version of the judgment removes the urgency of the question. 20 miles an hour is still plenty fast. I like a pedestrian's odds at 20 miles an hour a lot more with a vertical curb. So that's just, and hearing that they can absorb that expense and that they can do it, I would be inclined to not find that acceptable. Other thing on my mind, to the point of what Jason raises, which I'm inclined to agree with out of the box, I think we're constrained here, given that our LUO provides for the necessity of these charging stations. I think that given the nature of the decision that we have in front of us tonight, it does comply. So I think you make a good point. And I think that we should question whether in a development like this, those common charging stations serve the purpose. I think people make a really good point that people want to charge their cars in their garage. And that we don't, this is a car-based community. So having that, but all that said, I'm not sure we can move that forward. So my summation of my thoughts would be to not find the roll curb acceptable and otherwise to proceed with what we've got.
Okay. Councilmember Frey.
Madam Mayor, I have a thought I'd just like to share with the council to see if this elicits anything from anyone else. I don't think that my question is for my colleagues here is actually about this project. It has a little bit more to do with the ordinance. You may have noticed from my questions about the amenity points that we're requiring the developer to create a play area. And one of the things that we've looked at before, and that I know that the environmental boards have previously come back to us with, is that historically that's been interpreted as a cleared play space, and it has fallen out of fashion in Carrboro to clear cut a bunch of trees in order to create a play field. So now we're switching to this sort of naturalized play area. But we're still seeing the requirements of our ordinance butt up against each other. We're requiring 40% open space. We're also requiring the buffers around the ephemeral stream there. I've been out to this property because I was actually serving on the planning board at the time that this initially came through. So I've walked the area where the play space is, and you cannot get through it because it is all bamboo. This is not actually a condition that the developer can do anything about. It's also not a condition that the HOA is, I think, going to be able to make a meaningful difference in. So my question is, this is not about this development, it's about what our ordinance is asking us to do in terms of racking up amenity points when there isn't a place on the property that you can put this that's not going to be eaten by bamboo in a couple of years. Sort of, I hope that we are able to keep that in front of us as we go through our rewrite process. I'm just going to sort of leave that thought out there for folks.
Thank you, Councilmember Frey. Councilmember Haven O'Donnell.
Yeah, couple things, but on the bamboo is considered invasive. So what is our policy about invasive removal when it comes to site planning? Do we have anything?
Is that a question for Marty, maybe?
No, it's a question, well, I guess so.
Could be Marty.
Because this is not just for this situation.
Let me speak to it for a moment, and if I might defer over to Chad here to supplement what I say, and that is, we as a staff will certainly work with the developer when we get to the construction plan stage to make sure this is clarified. I appreciate it being brought up tonight so we can talk through it. Our ordinance does establish, what is allowable and not allowable with respect to the stream buffers. Chad referenced zones 1 and 2 earlier. Generally speaking, there's more allowed in zone 2 than 1. So with that said, Chad has just put something in front of me that I haven't read yet. So Chad, can you get up here and tell them what you just put in front of me?
Council, I'm just trying to be efficient. What I put in front of Marty was the state's guidelines for maintenance within buffer zones, and one of those is the removal of trees. This is a direct quote from the state publication. Removal of trees that are in danger of causing damage to structures or human life. That is pretty much invasive or dead. So that hopefully answers your question about the ability to maintain or remove things from those areas as they die or as they move sidewalk or if they affect the 4-foot wide hand-cut trail. There are provisions in state guidelines to allow maintenance to occur in those areas. Marty didn't have a chance to read that before you asked him. Thank you.
Thank you, Chad.
Okay, so I'm still not clear about if a site for development has invasives and they're going to be a problem going forward, right? Because they're invasive, who's responsible? Should the developer be responsible for the removal prior to development? Yes, no?
Yes, is the answer to that.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So does that answer your question?
I'm not sure that it does. My understanding is that the testimony that we just received is about the permission to remedy invasives in a stream buffer. It doesn't speak to the requirement to remove invasives anywhere at any time other than to turn it into an amenity, if you follow me. So in other words, bamboo that is outside the play area but in the stream buffer, they would be permitted to remove it, but there's nothing, as I understand it, in ordinance that requires them to do so. There are, for instance, there's an enormous amount of invasive wisteria in the town, and the town is not, knocking on homeowners' doors and saying you have a responsibility to the environment to remove this wisteria. And that applies also to developers who are in process, and then also to the HOA afterwards. The only reason that this touches our ordinance is because that area is turned into a play space, which is considered an amenity that they then have to maintain in order to be in keeping with the SUP.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll mention just for the record, we do have a list of invasive species that we do not allow to be planted.
Right.
So there is that, and I'm sure, wisteria is on it, I'm sure, as well as bamboo. It may be, Nick, you may want to listen closely. It's not my place to judge what is a reasonable condition, but you may want to propose, discuss with the developer some type of condition that may be reasonable that just makes it explicitly clear that that requirement is on the developer to leave in place for the HOA an area that has been well managed. I'm not exactly sure how you might phrase that, but
Yeah, that's where, Catherine, that's where I'm going with that. So that's one thing I'd like to consider in terms of a recommendation to staff to look into. With the question of the roll-type curb, one of the aspects of a roll-type curb that I haven't heard discussed, and so, Marty, I don't know if this is something you can answer for me, but compared to a standard, does a roll curb, how does it impact flow and speed of stormwater? Is it slower? Is it faster? Do we have any information?
I would ask one or both engineers to speak to that rather than me. Chad and/or the town engineer is here as well, if you'd like to hear from
Okay,
them.
thank you.
So to answer your question, we model both curbs hydraulically in the same way, meaning that they're going to, in our evaluation of gutter spread, of curb placement, of storm drainage capacity, we model the standard curb and that particular profile for roll curb in the exact same way. And keep in mind that we're not asking for something that's not already in place in many other municipalities. That is a valid question, and that is the standard method for evaluating both.
Yeah, I just looking at it and thinking about how much faster water is moving when it is not sloped. That's the reason I'm asking.
So a lot of what, okay, so let me help myself understand your question. The speed of the water in the curb gutter pan, or the lowest depression of the gutter, is affected by the longitudinal slope of the street, meaning if you're driving up and down a hill.
Yeah.
And based on my memory of our profiles, we are less than 5% of a change in vertical
Gradient.
anywhere in the neighborhood.
Okay.
Maybe with the exception of the connection at Lucas Lane where we're matching existing grade, but we don't have any steep streets here.
Well, I from looking at the pictures that I looked at during the weekend, I actually like the roll curb as an option. Not so much for construction purposes, but in terms of, and I'm just going to say this, when children are bicycling, a roll curb is safer. It just is. It gives them more access to quickly get off the street should they need to do so. I've always found that to be one aspect people don't talk about, but I've seen it, and I see that it makes a difference. I also think having that slope on the curve on the curb helps to percolate water off the site. So, you know, I think that that's something we should consider. Now, there was one other item, oh, the EV. I like the idea of the EV being in the, you know, in the units. It absolutely makes complete sense in the direction that we're going, to have EV chargers that are standing singularly in the neighborhood. It's just not forward-thinking enough for the direction that we're going with the need for electrification. And lastly, I wanted to ask a question about, and this goes back to trees and tree placement. I'm not really clear on, because of where the home sites are fairly close to the curb, exactly. Can you pull up something and explain more specifically so I'm understanding the space? One of the reasons I'm asking this is because of experience I've had with trees and plumbing lines. So I want to understand that the trees have the space they need for the root system that keeps them healthy and growing and doesn't impact the owners.
Almost there. I'm
Yeah.
pulling up the landscaping plan. I didn't have that particular sheet in the presentation, so here we go. And I'm going to zoom in some here. So you'll see Chad has drawn in, indicated that these little circular blobs here, if you see where the cursor is, are the proposed location for the street trees. The reason, and I appreciate the concern about the utilities, but the reason they have been shown here, and that the staff and the developer had a fairly significant amount of discussion about the topic, is that they are asking for the ability to bring stairs, decks, and front facades of homes all the way up to the property line. So even though the ordinance grants the flexibility to, within it's either 30 or 35 feet in the front yard, plant a street tree, and it counts as a street tree, the notion that you would plant a street tree there and then a homeowner may come 5 years from now and ask to build an addition or a deck in that front yard area, that's why we're asking that they put them in the right-of-way, and the right-of-way only in this particular situation.
So how much space would a root tree base have approximately?
I'm not sure I understand. By space, you mean the roots?
Linear feet. I saw something, 4 feet, 2 feet. Clarify for me.
Chad, I believe you've designed here a 3-foot strip, right? Typical 3-foot strip.
But
Let me ask Chad to clarify that so we make sure we get it right.
So if you'll notice that the tree is located behind the sidewalk, so that the sidewalk is the boundary of the tree as it goes towards the roadway, but the area towards the home site is basically unlimited to the front yard.
Let me make sure I heard you right, Chad, for the sake of everyone.
Stay up there, Chad.
The location you've proposed here is essentially at the very edge of the right-of-way and somewhat effectively at the front yard line, rather than in the 3-foot strip.
Yeah.
Right, sorry, Mark. So this was like Marty said, this was a topic of a lot of deliberation, and the result is a way to preserve the tree without the homeowner inadvertently or purposefully removing the tree, providing the tree the maximum amount of root zone possible given the constraint of the sidewalk and the setbacks that are published in this zoning. So we think between staff and us and the developer that we have provided the best environment to preserve the tree in its longevity.
So if the tree is closest to the residence, correct? Then the residential owner, when these trees get big, they get really, even if they're only 40 feet, the root base is much greater. So, it could be coming up to their foundation.
So the idea is you have an ordinance requirement that has specified a certain number of street trees. Those are trees that are planted along the streetscape. In this case, we have to make a determination how to best, for lack of a better word, control the tree's prosperity. Do we put the tree on private property and allow me, the homeowner, tomorrow to go cut it down? Well, that defeats the whole purpose of having the street tree.
Right.
We put the street tree in the right-of-way. It's a foot closer to the sidewalk than it could have been, but at least town staff has the ability to maintain that tree, remove that tree, work with the tree's roots when they come up into the sidewalk, replace the sidewalk section, or manicure the tree, because the ownership of that tree is in the public right-of-way, which then allows the town to go work on it. So between staff and our team, it's the best situation with the competing values of the ordinance and the health of the tree.
Okay, all right, I'm more clear. Yep.
Any other questions? So I'm thinking that we want to go ahead and find some consensus around the conditions that we have before us. Marty, can you get the conditions up, please? Questions that I have heard, and I may have missed something. EV charging station, the play area, roll-type curb. So
The play area, I don't believe is actually in a condition. Marty, can you?
You're correct.
is it okay? So then I have two. That was just a question of
You said-
yours.
When you say that, do you also mean bamboo, the invasive removal?
Yeah,
Okay.
the whole discussion. EV charging station, roll-type curb. Oh, here we are. So, number 3, I believe. How are we feeling about the use of the roll-type curb? I've heard different comments from different council members.
I'll say personally, I am unconvinced that the roll-type curb would
Be safe.
be safer for people. And I would actually say that because of the expected speeds, a standard curb would do a better job of deflecting a car at, say, 20 or 30 miles an hour. A roll-type curb, somebody texting, as they do, could easily just drift up onto the sidewalk. Which, again, I am certainly open to having my mind changed by an expert, but I am, as of now, unconvinced that a roll-type curb would be safer for a pedestrian.
Thank you, Councilmember Miro. Other comments about number 3, use of roll-type curb? Councilmember Posada.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And just so that I understand this well, Marty, should we decide as a council, because I'm also not convinced that a roll tide is roll tide. It's been a long day, y'all. So I apologize.
Okay, take your time.
Yeah. So say we do not add this recommendation. It's my understanding that if we don't add it, then it would revert to a standard. Correct.
Yes, I think the simplest way to address that matter would be to just modify this condition to say town council finds the use unacceptable, or otherwise just state that you want standard curb.
Standard.
Just a pretty straightforward statement, just a modification to number 3.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Posada. And so just remembering, I think that the applicant the Zen brothers would be okay, and it would not be, major for us to go to the standard curb. Is that what I heard earlier?
I definitely had that conversation because I wanted to be able to stand in front of you and report as much. So I don't know if they want to say more about it.
Yeah, and they're welcome to come up if they would like to. Omar?
I mean, if we're forced to put standard type curb in, we'll abide by that. I've tried for years, Claremont South, Kentfield, to ask for a roll type curb just because, it's not only the amount that I remove to put in, we have tiny little lots. You have a straight driveway. These are 4,400 square foot lots. I think Chad and Josh with Sungate would both agree that the turn-in radius of a standard driveway curb gets damaged a lot more than a roll-type curb as well. I know everyone has their thoughts on safety. A lot of the adjacent neighbors are the ones who have brought up the whole issue of safety. And I guess what I would ask is, if ultimately we do decide tonight to move forward and you guys do impose a condition that we use regular type curb, that you'd allow me the opportunity to bring a professional back here at some later date to discuss that specific issue, whether it be the person from Public Works or a safety expert, so that it's at least a possible open discussion and not a shut and closed discussion.
Thank you, Mrs. Zen.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Councilmember Frey.
Madam Mayor, I think it would be helpful if we were able to, although staff and the applicant have done the best they can, I do think we were a little short on expert testimony on that subject tonight. I wanted to speak to something that Councilmember Haven O'Donnell had brought up about, so I wanted to make sure that I surfaced this logical impossibility about the bamboo removal. That said, I don't think that there is anything that we could actually ask as a condition that makes sense, if you follow me. There is nowhere else to put the amenity. The project can't move forward without the amenity. We can't actually, as a condition, burden the HOA with additional bamboo removal on top of that, and our ordinance is not set up to actually require that. If anybody else has any ideas about a condition that could actually remedy that situation, I'd love to hear it. I can't think of one.
I think we asked the developer to remove the invasives. I know it's very expensive for residential folks. Marty, I mean, is there a way that a condition can request that the developer remove the invasives?
Yes. Do you mean specifically in
Outside
the
of
area we're talking
the-
about? Yes. I mean, what I had envisioned was and I'm trying to keep this simple in my head, but a condition that essentially would mandate that the area be maintained in perpetuity as the intended playfield. I do understand where you're coming from and appreciate the notion that it would be a difficult imposition for an HOA given the nature of bamboo, but you certainly can create the condition, and then it is on the staff to work with the HOA over the course of time. And I'm not sure whether you'll want to do that or not, but you could,
Well, the reason why I'm interested in having the conversation, pursuing it, is because we have, between Chapel Hill and Carrboro, we have a lot of folks who spend a lot of time volunteering to remove invasives.
Yes.
And it makes perfect sense to me that if, a development is being established, that we ask the developer to work with that to begin with?
Yes, I think, I mean, it is implicit and perhaps explicit in as much as I'm saying it, that the developer would be obligated to create a baseline. You know, we wouldn't, as a staff, go out and say this is okay if there's a bunch of bamboo there.
Right.
But how that plays out over the course of time, I understand the concerns.
Right. It's a matter of sustainability, is
Yeah.
what I'm saying.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm gonna switch gears here for a second, and ask Nick if you can stand for a question here. So, we've heard, and I also stand similar to Councilmember Frey, and I think there's some testimony that we haven't heard tonight. And if I'm at home, I'm thinking they all need more information. Why can't they wait? Right. So, talk us through what is having to make a decision tonight. What does that mean? Should we want to hear more testimony from experts? 'Cause I feel like folks on this side of the dais know what that means, but folks watching at home, and I know there's going to be a lot of them. What does that? What are our options?
Does this work? Yeah. The council is free to continue the hearing. For example, until, I'm just picking a date, January 6th, right?
Bad day.
Well, whatever.
Reverse.
Well, whatever.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? I can't tell. Okay. In other words, you can continue the hearing to a date certain, so you don't have to re-advertise it, right? And at that hearing, you would be able to resume discussion, you know, about, or hear any further, for example, expert testimony about this roll curb, right? Or any other issue that the council still had questions about, which would then be relevant to your decision on certain conditions that you couldn't decide upon now.
Does that answer your question?
That does.
You just continue it.
So, I mean, I think that's an option, right? So I think there's, I wanted to hear what our options were, Nick, so thank you for that. Yeah, I don't know how I would decide on this just yet. I have my own personal opinions. I haven't heard enough testimony to figure out whether or not one is safer than the other. So I don't know, just when it comes to this specific condition, but I wanted to get that on the record from the attorney. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. Mr. Zinn?
Thank you for entertaining me. So I just wanted to mention, and I know we'll probably get into the whole EV charger discussion as well, but while we're on the discussion and the topic matter of the roll curb, I've been in many meetings up here over the years, and many contested meetings, many controversial meetings. And what I would like to do after, and again, this is no dig at the town of Carrboro, but after a 2.5-year process to finally be in front of you tonight, I'm elated. Time is money, and that's clear in many circumstances. We have a loan on this property. We don't own this property. So every day that, you know, ticks by, we're just paying more and more interest at 8%. So I would humbly request that council makes a decision tonight, considering the fact that I don't really, again, this is me, after coming up here for many years and seeing, I don't see a very controversial plan in front of you. I think that with regard to the curb, and I mentioned this before, if you so decide that you require me to put in standard type curb, I would like to request the opportunity for a discussion at a future date. I'm going to have 6 months of construction plan review. We've already practically engineered this plan, but it still takes 5 or 6 to 7 months until anything's able to happen. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Zinn. I think I do remember Mr. Herman telling us earlier in the meeting that this was not a decision point tonight, that it would be brought back to a meeting in January for a written decision. And so there would not be a decision tonight per se. And because of that, I would think that that would allow more room and also more time for more information that council members are obviously asking for as it relates to getting some expert testimony about the curb situation. And Mr. Zan had mentioned potentially bringing someone else in as well. And so that's just kind of where I am. We could leave this open, or continue the public hearing into January. Councilmember Posada.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for that reminder. And that prompts a question again, Nick, for you. Does staff, or maybe the town manager, I don't know, does staff need us to close the public hearing before starting to come up with that written recommendation that we would then have to vote on? And does it have to happen in separate business meetings?
I think the answer to that, if I'm getting your question, the answer to that is no.
Okay.
I mean, in other words, one thing that's available to the council is to go through all of the conditions that they can have an understanding about as to what they agree to.
Mm-hmm.
They may decide, the council might decide, for example, with this roll-type curb, that that's something that's uncertain. And and if the council went so far as to do that, the council could authorize the staff to prepare a draft decision that would leave blank the condition, for example, with respect to the roll type or something else. And at the next public hearing, you heard further evidence on that, then the council would make a decision only about one or two conditions, which they could then approve.
We can edit it on the spot.
And edit it on the spot, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that.
Thank you, Mr. Herman, and also Councilmember Posada. So are we okay with all conditions except for number 3 seems to be the sticking point? Is Marty, can you just kind of roll through these?
We've discussed the trees.
Mm-hmm.
7, 8, and 9, as I mentioned earlier, are just kind of boilerplate conditions.
Randy had asked about number
10 as well. 11, I don't think there's any controversy there. Boilerplate as well. 12, boilerplate. Number 13 is, we had some discussion earlier about the setbacks and their desire to be able to build decks, stairs, et cetera, all the way up to the property line. So this just clarifies that. I thought I deleted 14, excuse me. Voluntary annexation has already occurred here. So 14 is no harm there, but not needed. I thought I deleted that one. 15, prior to final plat approval, that's just making sure that Town Attorney Herman puts his eyes on the covenants to make sure everything's in order. And then if you wish to discuss the comments from the advisory boards, they are here as well.
Thank you so much, Marty.
You're welcome.
Council members.
Madam Mayor, so taking out number 14, which shouldn't be there, I don't think there is any debate from me on any of them except number 3. My only question about number 3 is that we do have a question about it that we have not been able to receive expert testimony on. I don't know if that stops us from making a decision about that condition tonight. So that's where I'm sitting.
So if I can, I think what we heard is that we can not make that decision on that one condition. I think that that's acceptable. To be honest, I think it is likely to be a quick decision. And I would hate to see this like overly belabored. I can imagine retracting my position in the face of expert testimony about the curb. So I think that that's probably the way forward. Is exactly what Eleazar and Nick are hammering out. Leave 3.
Hanging out.
Yeah, I guess we need a little bit of direction on what language is the appropriate way to leave that open. But I think that's the smoothest way forward.
Councilman Posada.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, because I think that was my question now, and Nick, I'm going back to you. So, because I do believe, and if I'm not mistaken, I'm also in line with everything else except for number 3. Would there be any, what action would the staff, the council need to take tonight in order to continue to have the public hearing open so that we could hear the testimony and still direct staff to come up with a written recommendation, leaving that number 3 open?
Yes, you do both. And so in a motion, what you would do is to make a motion to continue the public hearing, and you need to give a date certain. We got to re-advertise. And that in connection with that motion, that you direct the staff to prepare a decision, for example, granting the special use permit, right? And direct that in connection with that written draft, that they leave blank number 3, which is going to be discussed. And so you see what happens when you convene next time. You'll make a decision about all of it, but then particularly about whether to leave 3 as it is or whether to modify it as Marty suggested, which is to say that the council, it requires that the applicant have the standard curb as opposed to the roll curb.
Thanks for that.
I would just supplement what Nick said by just mentioning that, yes, we could bring back, kind of a 3A and 3B and just have the wording in place. What they're effectively, the standard curb is the standard for Carrboro, so they're asking for a deviation. We set up the condition as a finding that you thought that was okay, but the option B would essentially just say that they use standard curb.
Thanks for that. And then, town manager, remind me, when was this to come back to us? I know that maybe Nick mentioned in January, but do we have a specific date?
We can bring it back the first business meeting, which I do believe is January 6th, but the mayor says no.
I am looking at the calendar. I'm looking at the calendar that we just adopted, and it is the 7th.
What was the date?
So,
The 7th.
yeah, let us say, because just January 6th just has a bad taste in my mouth. So, with that, Madam Mayor, whenever appropriate, I would like to make a motion.
Councilmember.
I believe Councilmember Haven O'Donnell was
Haven
first.
O'Donnell, Frey, Merrill.
Okay, so 2 points. One, the transportation folks made the recommendation for traffic calming on Lucas. Where does that fit into these recommendations? Or is that something that, go ahead. Is it?
I have it available
Yeah, it's
on
number
screen
2
now.
on
Number 2.
advisory board, but it was for traffic calming on Lucas.
Yes, there is currently proposed a speed table, and Chief Potter is here. He has done a preliminary review of it and found it acceptable, and he will be involved in the construction plan review as well for a final approval of that design with respect to, the safety of the trucks themselves. This came out of the advisory board meetings, so it, beyond what you see here, has not been discussed between the staff and the developer yet. So if you wish to discuss it further, now would be timely to do that.
Yeah, I would like to see that included, since that was a strong recommendation from our TAB.
Was that number 2?
That's number 2 under advisory board
Yeah,
recommendations.
what's on the screen right now?
Yes.
Number 2, okay.
Yes, number 2. And similar to how we're determining we want to handle the roll curve, I would ask and make a motion that staff prepare some draft language that that speaks to this question of the invasives, not only the removal but maintenance, just for us to be able to see and deliberate when we come back. So I don't know whether that's adding on to a motion or it's 2 separate motions.
I would think it would be adding
I'll be adding
Adding it,
yeah.
we're just adding it to the.
I'm wide awake.
That's
Wide
okay.
awake.
Councilmember Frey, and then Merrill.
I think my question has been addressed
Okay.
since I had my hand up. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay,
Councilmember Merrill?
I had maybe just a question for Mr. Zinn. Would you rather have us go ahead with standard curbs tonight and just get it over with? Or would you rather keep pushing this down and continue this discussion in January?
Jason, thanks for the question. And this is what I was asking for. I mean, if I would prefer a vote tonight, and I would request that we have the opportunity to come back before you within the next 6 months, such that, if we or another, expert testimony can come in front of you and prove you otherwise, and you vote on it, then we go with the roll curb. Is that something that is possible, Mr. Town Attorney? Marty?
Yes, I'll speak to that as it has been outlined there. I meant to say this earlier. So if you approve it in whatever manner you approve it tonight, as the developer, they can come back and request a modification to the permit. Yeah. The matter we're talking about, we would very likely classify as a minor modification. We wouldn't have to advertise to the public again. It would just come back on a regular business agenda for your consideration.
And I guess that's my interest, is just like, what's the most efficient way to get this moving forward?
So yeah, I mean, I would prefer that you vote on a standard curb tonight, honestly. And I wanted to say one other thing specifically related to the charging stations. I know that Claremont neighbors aren't very excited about having a charging station there. I know that it's required as part of the ordinance. It does seem unusual to have a charging station in the middle of the neighborhood. So, my proposal would be to, and again, I'm not looking to install chargers in every single garage, but I would be willing to rough in a 220 line in a single or dual gang box in every garage, so that when someone wants to add a charger, all they simply have to do is remove the cover plate and install the charger. So that is something else I wanted to bring forth tonight while we're still in discussions. Thank you.
I'd love that.
Yeah, that seems
and I
right.
appreciate the heck out of it. I believe that we cannot, I believe in this hearing, we cannot remove the charger as required by ordinance.
Right.
We can't do that
But
tonight.
we can strongly encourage you and appreciate that you're willing to do it, because I think it's way more meaningful.
And maybe I could come back along with a roll curb text amendment and discuss that same motion. So makes a lot more sense to me.
I would think we should pursue the roughed in 220 line. I think that's a really thoughtful accommodation from the developer. I think we have the separate question of how to deal with the statutory requirement of finding this in compliance with our ordinance. If indeed a minor modification could prevent the Zins from having to spend needless money, I think we would probably look favorably on that. But we are also going to be revising our ordinance. This is a long-term project. There may be opportunities to remove those chargers further down the line through other means. I just want to be really clear that tonight we're a little bit constrained here, which I think is maybe the case on. I guess I want to be clear too on the traffic calming measures that Randy's talking about, because I'm amenable to the idea of further traffic calming, but I'm mindful of the source here and Nick's note, and the fact that what we have does comply with the ordinance. Are we able to condition further traffic calming? Is that appropriate in this hearing?
Well, I will defer to what Nick may choose to say here. I would also be interested in two things. One, how the Zins feel about it as the developer here, just whether, I mean, if they don't have any issue with it, then it may not be an issue. But the second thing, from the staff perspective, it's fairly clear what is being suggested, requested here, but I would want to know that there was staff consensus, and we could ensure that there is staff consensus before we bring the decision document back before you, if you decide to vote tonight on exactly what this means, whether there's any ambiguity in what is being asked for here. Nick, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah. Councilmember Now, the actual case law about conditions says that you may impose conditions that are reasonably related to the proposed use and which are not in conflict with the LUO, and that otherwise further a legitimate objective of the LUO. And that's almost verbatim what the language is from the case law. And so you can tell from my phraseology how that implicates your concern about changing the LUO here. The only other comment that I would make is that if you look at 2 that Councilmember Randy Haven O'Donnell mentioned, there is an ambiguity in the actual language of that, which is that further traffic calming be considered. Are you considering it or requiring it? Later on in that paragraph, it talks about that a flexible pedestrian crossing sign be installed. That's pretty specific. So the only thing I'm pointing out to you is that to the extent that you talk about this further condition 2, and if you want to include it, I'd firm up that language, because I don't know what it says to consider it.
And I might add or offer that we could bring back, have some discussion with the developer between now and bringing the decision document back, and bring back what we as a staff, assuming that the developer mutually agreed to it, would be a more tightly written condition that accomplishes what is intended here.
I do love the bulb outs. Love those bulb outs.
Did we get everybody? You?
I only have one more note, which is, although I take Councilmember Haven O'Donnell's point about the bamboo and that is important, I think that represents a condition that is in conflict with our ordinance, which is regrettable.
The removal of the invasive species, was that?
Well, as
Of the
the
bamboo?
land use ordinance is going to be reviewed and changed, and given what we know about climate change and invasives, I think it's a solid forward movement. So,
I take your point, Councilmember Haven O'Donnell, but our ordinance currently would be in conflict with expanding the requirement that they remove invasives outside of this play area. I wish it weren't, but it is, and so I don't think that we can change that with a condition on this project. We just have to get a move on with our land use ordinance rewrite so that we can be clear about that in general.
I'm referring to the play area, but I'm also including maintenance, because right now, the LUO is specific to is it the bioretention area? Is that what it was, or
Well,
wetlands? I don't remember.
Well, the ordinance
Area.
clearly prohibits the planting of any of this. What we would need to work out, and can do so if it's the board's desire to, for us to put in front of you a draft condition, figure out the wording with respect to exactly what the ordinance currently allows in the stream buffer. And I'm not sure if
That's
I'm
what-
following exactly what you're saying, may be in conflict or not.
Well, may I see if I can tease this out, Madam Mayor?
Yeah, I was distracted when you were talking about it earlier. Sorry
So-
for that.
We know that there's a play space that would not be accepted as a naturalized play space if it were impassable due to bamboo. So the developer is going to be required to remove it. The LUO is then required to maintain it in that condition. That's already accounted for. So, Councilmember Haven O'Donnell, what would you add to that condition? What would you add as a condition beyond that part?
No, I wasn't clear that it would be maintained.
Oh.
That's the part that I wasn't clear. And as to who is responsible.
For the maintenance.
My understanding is that it is the HOA that is responsible once it's transferred to them. And that's one reason why, aside from a question about conflict with the ordinance, I don't want to be burdening the HOA with an undefined, indefinite obligation to remove bamboo from a larger area than they are already required to do. That's a Sisyphean task.
Yeah, this might not be the best test case for this, but it's a question I think we need to grapple with, considering how much time and energy and money is spent on the part of the town to respond to invasives.
Invasive species,
So,
yep.
thank you. I think we're of an
Point
accord
well
there.
taken. Yep. Councilmember Posada, move us to a motion. Don't notice what you.
Okay, so.
If there are no further comments, I think everybody's just kind of weighed in and we're, okay.
So I just had a couple of questions before I move into a motion. Sorry, y'all. So I'm hearing kind of the desire to move forward, and I do want to move forward, and I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, that even if we close the public hearing tonight and do a vote on all of these recommendations, we still have to wait for staff to come back on the 6th with that written decision for us to finally vote on. Is that correct?
Yes, if you closed the hearing tonight.
If we closed the hearing. If we left it open and asked staff to come back with the recommendations we already approved, with a couple of spaces that we can amend, number 3, for example, kind of finalizing language on transportation, the advisory board, number 2, for example, we could close the public hearing on the 6th, officially vote on those recommendations, and that decision document would be ready for us to vote on that night as well?
Correct.
So either way, we have to wait
Either way,
until
we're there.
January 6th, 7th. 7th.
Seven.
Correct. With that in mind, I would, Madam Mayor, I would move that we leave the public hearing open until January 7th, where we will hear additional testimony and around the issues that we did not get closure tonight, including the,
Name those issues.
yes, and including the curb, whether roll or standard, in particularly looking at safety for those measures. At the same time, asking staff to move forward with drafting a decision letter, decision document that include the now 13 recommendations the council has agreed upon, leaving out number 3 in order for us to discuss, and some possible amendments to Transition, Mobility, and Greenways Advisory Commission, number 2.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Did I do that right?
Friendly amendment that per the developer's wish, we just move the standard curb and we consider a possible minor modification.
Later on.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So that was number.
I'll accept that.
And that goes with the EV rough-in also at a later point.
Yeah, I guess if that needs codifying, we'd appreciate the codifying of the rough end for the EV chargers in each lot.
Yes, that the removal of the common area charging station would require a text amendment, but that may be accomplished at some later date, at which point they could do a modification.
So
Yes.
no need to be on this motion.
Right.
Right.
Perfect. Nick, did I say that right?
Yeah, I think you're there.
If council will entertain it, Chad wants to say
Yeah,
something.
come on back, Mr. Shad.
Mayor, just to be clear, I want to make sure that we are both thinking in the same lines. We're asking for a vote of approval or denial tonight, specific to item 3 being removed, where standard curb would be used in the construction drawings until a later date, which we may bring that back to you as a simple modification.
That's right.
Is that
Right.
correct?
Yeah,
We're
that's,
all on the same
that's where we
page.
just landed.
Yep,
Good.
we're there.
So I make that motion.
So we have the motion and we have the friendly amendment from Mayor Pro Tem now.
Yes.
And so is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Let's do it. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Thanks to everyone for your patience. We're going to get there. Thank you so much.
Thanks, y'all, for dealing with all that.
You're welcome.
Thank you guys as well. Yeah. Had to press through that one. I knew it was gonna be like that too. Thank you.
Yeah, talk to you soon.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you. Wait just a second, whoever's gonna leave. Thank you.
No, I'm going to do it. It's not true.
All right, Town Manager Tony, we're down to the general agenda. Ready?
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you. There are 2 items on the information item. I will note that the second item can be moved to a future meeting if necessary. It's not urgent, it's for information only. The first item, I know Daryl's ready. The
Yeah,
first
he is.
item is an introduction. We had a lot of conversation around the LUO and the need for a rewrite. So this is an opportunity to give you an overview of the company, the consultant, which is CodeWrite Planners, and their consultant partners that will be working to develop our land use ordinance. Chad Meadows, if he's there, will be the one leading the presentation and introducing his partners. And I wanted to note as well that this is just an introduction, but that we definitely will come back for a work session February 11th so that the council can provide input and some level of direction for the LUO.
Thank you so much, Town Manager Tony. Welcome. Hello.
Thank you.
Hello, welcome.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Madam Mayor, council members, I'm Chad Meadows with CodeWrite. It's my pleasure to be here. Surely do appreciate your time and the opportunity to introduce the project team and give you a little bit of detail about the project that we're working on. So what I'm going to do before I move into a PowerPoint presentation is just ask a couple of folks who've been standing by to introduce themselves to come forward, or at least to come on the box there and introduce themselves, and then we'll talk a little bit more about where we go from here. So Courtney, I'll ask you to please come forward.
Hi, I'm Courtney Tanner. I work with CodeWrite. I have over 20 years as a planner, worked as a planning director in multiple jurisdictions in the Wake County area, and I'm currently serving as a deputy town manager in a jurisdiction close by to here as well. I am actually one of the drafters of the code, and so I'll bring my experience overseeing planning, engineering, inspections, and how you fold that into a legally defendable set of regulations. So it's a pleasure to meet each of you this evening.
All right, thank you so much.
Thanks, Courtney.
All right, Courtney.
Courtney and I have been working together for over 10 years, so we've got a well-established relationship. I'll also ask, I guess, Hunter, can we start with you? Since you're just happen to be first in the Hollywood squares for me. Can't hear you, though.
On mute or something.
Still no? How about you, Eliza? Can we hear you?
No.
This is an us thing, not a them thing. They can hear each other.
Can you guys hear each other? Not if you can. We cannot hear you. Okay, well.
We got a low technology. There you go.
It's all, shouldn't be joined from here. Give me 1 second, though.
I would say we give it 3 minutes, and I'm happy to introduce you, these guys to you. But they've been so patient.
Hunter, can you try again?
Who's talking, but not, she's talking.
Everybody's talking.
We don't hear anything.
We're trying.
Tell her we don't hear her.
All right.
Technology joke.
So we don't know.
I don't even see how to get to a chat here, so. Lamar, shall we just cut our losses and move forward? All right, guys. Hold on.
Get something in the meantime, you go ahead, but you can go ahead and present.
I guess I can't control that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and ask to switch over to the PowerPoint so that we can share those slides with you guys. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm sorry that we can't get the technology working, but I promise we'll get there. We will get there, maybe not tonight. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the team. I'll introduce the members of the team who we were not able to hear from tonight. I'll talk very, very quickly about the project scope and the schedule, how we would propose to accomplish this work. We'll talk about engagement, which is obviously a very, very important part of this project and something that we've taken to heart. And then finally, if there is interest on y'all's part to have some discussion, we would love to hear that, recognizing that, as manager mentioned, we will be back before you in February. We may have the opportunity to speak with you before February 11th. So I'll talk more about that in a moment. So with that, I'll move forward and try to explain some of the folks who are here. Again, I'm Chad Meadows. CodeWright is my firm. CodeWright has been in place for about 10 years. I live in Durham, and I've been drafting development codes for the last 20 years. Carrboro will be my 30-something ordinance that I've drafted over the course of my career. So I'm very happy to be working with you guys. This is a very, very important project for CodeWright and our staff, and we're very excited to be working with you. With us is Christine Edwards from Civility Localized. She is our public engagement lead. She is in Charlotte, North Carolina, and has been doing this work for state, federal, and local projects for many, many years. Hunter, who you saw but unfortunately could not hear, is with McAdams. He is our sustainability lead. He is one of the top green stormwater infrastructure folks in the state. So he is a civil engineer focused on stormwater, et cetera. Joining him with McAdams, or on McAdams' team there, is Eliza Monroe. She is a planner with, I guess, about 5 years of experience. I actually used to work with Eliza when she was staff planner to the Durham Board of Adjustment. I also serve as the chair of the Board of Adjustment for Durham City County. And Eliza is our equity lead. She is the one who is helping us focus on environmental and social justice. Also joining the team from McAdams is Mitchell Silver. Mitchell Silver is a rock star in planning circles. He was just elected to Raleigh City Council. He's been planning director for Raleigh. He was New York City's Parks Commissioner and has a very long resume of dealing with, zoning, racial equity, social justice. And he'll be providing strategy advice to the project on those topics. Now, legal sufficiency, very, very important. The Bro firm, hallowed, and certainly your ordinance is a very significant ordinance for North Carolina. You may or may not know it was one of the first, if not the first, unified development ordinances in the state. Very, very meaningful. And as a matter of fact, we often work with Bro professionals on other code projects across the state. However, because they work for you, you beat us to them. And so we are working with Fox Rothschild for this project. Lee Prince, who's been a municipal attorney for communities in California for about 10, 15 years, has moved to Charlotte and is now serving us in that capacity. Legal review, legal sufficiency. Karen Mallow is with CodeWright. She will be the assistant manager helping me and Courtney on the drafting side of things. She's got about 20 years of experience and has drafted codes all over North Carolina, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. David Lauby is our market economist. He is making sure that we're exploring regulations that don't work against affordable housing. We don't want to over-regulate or do things that are going to be contrary to our goals with respect to affordable workforce and attainable housing. He's also looking at market demand, market potential, and hopefully giving us some insight into the economic impacts of some of the regulations that we'll be drafting. Our goal is to make sure that Carrboro has as complete an economy as it possibly can, and we want to be working towards those ends with David and his members with Noel Consulting out of Atlanta, Georgia. David regularly works on public and private sector projects in Chapel Hill, in Durham. He's very, very familiar with the area. I've neglected to mention Michelle Podeswa. She is our transportation lead. Obviously, streets, sidewalks, bike lanes, greenways, very, very important aspects of the community. She is also with McAdams, so in their Raleigh office with Hunter. One person who's not shown here, but who we're very happy to have with us, is Justin Kiernan of City Collective. City Collective is an architecture firm, offices here in Raleigh, Atlanta. I think they also have an office in Australia, and we're very excited to have them with us to work on visualization, graphics, illustrations. That's one area of your current code that, frankly, could use a little bit of improvement. We would anticipate a new LUO that is highly illustrated, in the order of 300, 400, 500 illustrations, rather than what you've got right now, which is not that many. So this is our team. Every time we come to town, you will see me. I am your day-to-day person. I'm your project manager, and the buck stops with me. So I look forward to working with you guys on this project as we go forward. We have 10 tasks in this scope, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over this. I'll just say that this is a scope that we've developed over the years. It is flexible, and we are always willing to make adjustments as necessary to meet the needs of the town. This project initiation task is kind of the start for us, and this is day 2. We've got more work to do under task 1, which will be taken care of over the rest of this month into December and possibly January. From there is a code diagnosis, basically an analysis of the current regulations and a set of recommendations. We've built into this process 2 large community check-ins, and I'll talk more about engagement in a moment, but those are pivotal parts of engagement. Engagement will be happening throughout the process. It's ongoing and continuous. However, there's a couple instances in these community check-ins, Task 3 and Task 8, where we're really focusing in on working with the community on their hopes and fears for the project. This annotated outline, we think of that as a dress rehearsal for the document. Its structure, its organizations, its look, its feel, its voice, etc. It's not the full code, it's an outline of the code. All right, so that's something that we prepare and we share with the community to make sure that we're on target. Then and only then do we start the drafting process. We draft in 2 big sort of pieces. There's an initial version that's drafted, revised, presented to the community, discussed, vetted, and then we make revisions to that initial draft based on the comments that we get back. All right? Then it's to testing, and that's a very important part of the process as well. We'll actually stress test the code. We'll look at how it works, how it could be applied to developments that have been approved here in Carrboro recently, and redo those developments, or at least on paper, under the new regulation, and look for problems, unanticipated consequences, unintended consequences, and look for ways to break, quote, break the ordinance in pursuit of making changes so that those problems get addressed and get fixed. After the testing battery, we'll move back into the community check-in. Okay, everybody, this is where we are. We're getting ready to start the adoption process. Let's talk about the things that you mentioned to us in the first community check-in in Task 3 and how we addressed those issues, concerns, challenges, hopes, and fears. Okay? After that's done, we'll move into adoption. That's mandated by the state how that process works. And then
just to catch you up, we've been waiting here, and apparently they cannot hear us at all.
We can't hear you.
We hear you now.
Hear you now.
Hot mic. Hot mic.
Oh, hey!
We hear you.
Right.
Perfect time.
We lost you for a minute, but now you're back.
Guys, fantastic. Shall we go back to them and at least let them introduce themselves or move forward? It's your pleasure.
You go ahead and finish, and we're gonna keep them like they are, and
Okay.
then once you finish, then we'll pop them on the screen.
Okay, very good.
Thank you, Mr.
Sounds like a
Bonner.
great plan. Thank you. I'm glad we were able to get that fixed. Yay, technology. Let me talk about the project pillars or the footers, if you will, the basis for this project. These are 4 concepts that are very, very important for us as we go forward with this project. A lot of these come from Carrboro Connects. Some of them come from our thoughts about best practice. Obviously, climate resiliency will be a pillar or a footer for us for this project, focusing on how do we protect the town from a changing climate. Social equity, right? Environmental justice. How do we handle those issues? How do we address the disparities that exist now, and make things reparative, at least to the extent that we can with these new zoning regulations. Attainable housing, attainable, affordable, workforce, they go by many names, but the notion is more housing options, more choices, more affordability in more places for more people. Finally, predictable development review processes generally. We want to add clarity, we want to add efficiency, we want to add predictability. It should not take 2.5, 3, 4 years for a 32-unit subdivision to get through the process. And I know that you understand that now. How we go about making those changes is up to you, is up to the community, it's up to the staff. But as an outsider looking in, I would suggest to you that I'm sure we could find some ways to put your skills and your advisory board skills to even better use, thinking about the future rather than looking at site plans and subdivisions. So hopefully we'll find some ways to do that. We'll be making some suggestions at your discretion. This is our project schedule. It's about a 19-month schedule. We have this sort of project initiation task finishing up right after the first of the year. You'll note that we don't start drafting until January of 26. So we'll spend 2025 talking to the community, giving you our suggestions, hearing your input, and getting this annotated outline, this dress rehearsal for the new LUO put together before we ever pick up a pen and start drafting, okay? So that's our commitment to you. We would hope, pray, work very hard to get this document before you for final adoption before your summer recess. But so essentially in June of 26 is our goal for this project. Okay. Engagement, I mentioned before, very, very important part of the process. We'll have a social pinpoint site like you do with all of your other projects. You have an engagement staff that does a wonderful job with this. We're going to work with them and leverage our skills and create content and assist the town in making sure that everybody's aware of and knowledgeable about this project. We've incorporated 5 public forums, 3 rounds of 3 meetings of 3 issue-based panels. Remember the pillars or the footers? Climate resiliency, attainable housing, social justice. Those are pillars that we will continue to discuss with the community, not once, not twice, but 3 times over the arc of the project. We've got a project advisory group that you've put together, staff has put together to keep us guided, to give us insight, give us their vision. We'll meet with them 6 times. We had our first meeting with them yesterday. We'll be having 3 joint review meetings, which are sort of common, part of the tradition here in Carrboro, your groups of advisory boards who get together to consider text amendments. This is no different than that, and we'll be having meetings with them. We'll be in front of you 8 times. This is the first of our 8 times. So you'll be seeing our lovely happy faces 7 more times. We have 5 meetings with the development community. Like the public, the development community is an important customer, client to this project. And we think that it's very important that they be actively involved in this, have a voice in this, and that they're comfortable with what's being proposed. So we want to honor their commitment and their time. We've incorporated some opportunity for them. We've got 5 sets of office hours. What's an office hour? An office hour is a half a day where myself and my staff make ourselves available for anybody who wants to come in and talk to us. We will come to town. We will be here and available for anybody who wants to talk. If you want to have us do a presentation, we're happy to do that. We'll be working with staff to coordinate and schedule those things, but we want to be available for people during the day to answer their questions and make sure that they're aware of the process. Series of interviews, that's nothing unique. We always do that, and that'll be at different times in the process. And we're experimenting and exploring ways to use video and recording so that we kind of maximize our outreach and make this stuff as accessible as possible to everybody in the community. So that's the kind of thumbnail of our engagement plan. We've worked on it with your staff. We think it's appropriate. I'll mention to you that if we get into this and we find out that more is needed or we need to shift gears, happy to do that. Our goal is to make sure that engagement takes place, that people have a voice. That's our goal. If we need to make changes to these little bullet points on the screen, that's what we'll do. Okay. Our next steps are a social pinpoint launch. Launching the information that will go out to the general public about the project. We've got a series of interviews. Perhaps you might like to have either some one-on-one or two-on-one or three-on-one interviews with our staff, and that's something that we'd be very interested in and happy to accommodate. We're hoping to have some interviews with other members of the community. I mentioned a public forum, that first public forum, introducing the project to the community. We would anticipate that to happen in January, and we're working with your staff and your engagement folks now to understand how that can best roll out and how we should best put our first foot forward. Finally, that February 11th Town Council work session. Something we're very excited about. We plan to come prepared to ask you guys some philosophical questions at that time. For instance, the balance between predictability and flexibility, which is more important? Are we in a pro-growth or a slow-growth mindset? Do incentives or mandates work better? So those sorts of flavors and engaging in that discussion with you, in addition to y'all's thoughts and comments for us about what should happen with your land use ordinance. So those are our next steps. On behalf of Code Right, we're really excited to be here, and I'm happy, and we'll bring the rest of the suits back in, and I'm happy to answer or attempt to answer any questions you have.
So you're going to go ahead and allow the rest of the team to come in and introduce themselves?
If that's
yeah, that's
acceptable
great.
to you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Hunter, I guess we'll start with you.
Great. Well, thank you all for having us and selecting us for this project. As Chad mentioned, I am Hunter Freeman. I'm with McAdams in Raleigh. I've been in the Triangle for, since 1998, working almost exclusively on stormwater management issues, including green infrastructure and climate change problems. So happy to help the town and Chad write these updated ordinances to prepare you for the next many years of weather-related issues, and work with the development community as well to make sure Carrboro can succeed in its pursuit of this vision. So thanks. Glad to be here, and I'll pass it to Eliza.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Eliza Monroe. As Chad mentioned, my background is in planning. I previously was a public sector planner working at the city of Durham and the town of Apex. So I've been in the Triangle for a bit of time. Recently switched over to McAdams because it allows me to do some of the things I love, which is focus on equity as well as community engagement. So my role within this project is making sure that the process that we're embarking on is equitable, as well as figuring out ways to incorporate equity within the rewrite, as well as supporting Christine in any of her engagement efforts that her and Civility Localized undertake. So so great to meet all of you. Can't wait to see you all in person in the coming months. And I'll pass it over to Christine.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Christine Edwards, and I'm a founder and principal consultant at Civility Localized. We are headquartered in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I do have my colleague John Holmes on tonight as well. And I did have the pleasure of visiting Carrboro yesterday and participating in the kickoff meetings, and was just really appreciative of just being able to meet some of the community members, residents, and staff. We're going to be supporting community engagement on this project, and we're just happy to be here. So thank you. I'm going to pass it to David.
Hey, everybody. David Loby with Noel Consulting. We are based out of Atlanta, Georgia. We work around the country. About 80% of our work is private sector, 20% public sector. And so that enables us to really bring a real world private understanding to the process and make sure that the incentives that we look at are properly balanced with the market and kind of what it takes to sort of harness as much market development and power as you guys might want into your community, versus what does it take to kind of stop some of that market pressure if we don't want that in the community. So excited for the process. I'm up here in the market today and have been participating in the meetings to date, and really looking forward to it. Excited.
Thanks, David. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it. Any questions we can answer?
Council members, any initial thoughts or questions? Councilmember Frey.
I have one scope question, and that is, did a future land use map make it into the contracted scope?
The future land use map is a portion of Carrboro Connects. It's not necessarily a part of the land use ordinance. Will we be looking at a land use map? Yes. Will we be working with staff to figure out how best to change your zoning? Yes. We are not scoped to do a new zoning map. However, it is very possible, based on where we land with this project, that you could see some changes to your zoning map, or at least some recommendations for change. And I would say let's explore that as we get a little bit farther down the road. A good time to do that is after we've submitted the code diagnosis to you in task 2. That'd be a great time for us to start talking about, do we need a zoning map amendment as well? And we're happy to have that discussion.
Thank you.
Please.
And just to be, and so what we would end up doing is doing, if that's of interest, is just an amendment to the plan, the comprehensive plan, to amend the map, since it's a separate thing and on which, from which we would change the land, zoning map, et cetera. So it is an amendment that we would take forward. The staff would just do that in concert with all of the other input that we're doing.
Thank you so much, Trish. The reason I ask that is because the flume that's as part of the comprehensive plan is based on our current zoning categories, and I don't know how much of that is still going to be, some of that may be less useful once we've gone through more of this process.
Great observation. Agree. And once we've kind of dug our fingers into that, we look forward to talking through that with you.
Yep, that's a good question. Thank you, Councilmember Frey. Anyone else? Questions, comments? So we're only asked to receive the update, and we have.
If I may?
Go ahead.
I have just one more note to add. Because we've got everybody on screen and I have a chance to for everyone to hear me. In my day job, I am a practicing consultant on project-based work. So I have an acute appreciation for how hard that work is. I just wanted to say I appreciate all of your expertise, and I hope that you will bring all of your best practices to us and have the confidence in your expertise to call us out on our bull.
Well, on that.
Thank you.
As needed. As needed. Thank you very much.
I will take that invitation. Thank you.
I appreciate it, Councilmember Frey, for real. And thank you so much for coming in and your team. And all of us look forward to working with you. More to come.
Yeah, it's going to be a blast.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Town Manager Tony. So we're going to jump on that last item, or what do we want to do? Okay. Everybody's shaking their head, so we're going to jump.
Let's go.
All right. So the
Let's
last
go, Mr.
item,
Keys.
Daryl is prepared. He's dressed up for the first quarter budget update. As the budget was adopted last year, we promised to come back with an update on kind of where we are. And he'll be back to launch the budget process as well. But this is just for the first 3 months of the fiscal year.
All right. Well, good evening, Madam Mayor and Town Council. The purpose of this presentation is to provide an overview of the general fund budget and to show how the town performed during the first quarter of fiscal year 25. I also show a budget comparison between the first quarters of fiscal years 24 and 25. Before we begin, here's a recap of our adopted general fund budget. $32.6 million was adopted, and of that amount, $19.7 million was allocated to our general government, $7.9 million was allocated to our public safety, and the remaining $5 million was allocated to various entities such as non-departmental and debt service. Here, we compare quarter one results with fiscal years 24 and 25. The trend of our fund balance is showing an increase, which means that we're moving in the right direction. This $18 million that's showing for this year is an estimate that our finance system is calculating. It's not official until our fiscal year 24 audit is completed. And that will happen maybe in January or February. But we will have an official number during quarter three for you all. In terms of our revenues and expenditures, you see a steady trend. However, this year, there's a slight increase, which is a good thing because our budget, our general fund budget increased this year, and we'll talk more about our revenues and expenses. In this slide, I'm showing a bar graph of our revenue collection by category during the first quarter of the 2 fiscal years. As expected, the town's revenue collection is gradually ramping up in various categories such as property taxes. Please note that property taxes is one of the town's main income sources. And so far, we've received during quarter one $2.3 million of our $16.7 million budget. And you might say, well, Daryl, that's a low amount that we received during quarter one, which I would agree with you. However, by the end of quarter two or quarter three, we will receive a significant amount since the deadline for residents to pay their property taxes without facing a penalty is January 5th. So we will receive a significant portion soon. And here, overall, we collected 14% of our revenue this year compared to fiscal year 24. So you see that our revenue collection increased by 3%. Again, the trend is steady, but we're increasing our revenue. And so far this year, our revenue collection increased by $500,000. From $3.4 million to $3.9 million. My team and I are working diligently to record the town's revenue in a timely manner. Here's another bar chart of our revenues, of our expenditures by category. There are some categories such as our general government that shows a lower spending than this year than last year. And the reason is because anticipated invoices were received and submitted for payment during quarter two. So we submitted the payments last month. So you will see a change with our general government spending during the next report. Overall, our spending increased by $400,000 from $6.3 million to $6.7 million when you're comparing the 2 fiscal years. During the first quarter, we spent 21% of our budget, which leaves us with 79%. Again, you see the trend that it's steady, and last year we spent 22% of our budget. And again, steady trend with our expenditures, again, which is a good thing on our end. And here's a breakdown of our expenditures by personnel and operating. And as you all can see, 70% of our budget was spent on personnel and the remaining was spent on operating expenses. And as a municipality, personnel costs are a substantial part of our budget because we're covering salaries and fringe benefits. And as you all may know, this is normal for organizations to spend most of its budget on staff members. but I wanted to give you guys a breakdown of our expenditures. ARPA funds have allowed the town to invest in projects that support community needs. For fiscal 25, we have 30 projects and an adopted budget of $5.6 million. For quarter one, we spent and encumbered a total of $1.2 million, which leaves us with a balance of $4.4 million. And please note that many of the 30 projects have not broken ground yet. However, during quarter one, we had 8 active projects that were fully in progress. For example, the Racial Equity Commission recommendation, which is part of the Family Financial Assistance Program, that budget, we exhausted the entire $170,000 budget, helping families here in Carrboro with their rent and other bills that they were behind in. Other projects such as the disparity study and the underground fill tank, those projects are currently under contract and and the funds are encumbered until the services are completed. So we haven't spent the budget, but the funds are encumbered. And I do anticipate more projects being active in the coming months. All right. That concludes my presentation on the general budget. I provided you all with an appendix section that provides more information for your review as it relates to revenues and expenditures. And I'm happy to answer any questions at this time. I know many of you guys might be tired, so but I'm here to answer any questions.
I mean, I'm not sure what that means, Mr. Keys. Yeah, but we thank you for your presentation. We thank you. Council members, are there any questions of Mr. Keys? Councilmember Frey.
I apologize, Madam Mayor. This is not a question. I just wanted to say thank you for that excellent presentation. I found it particularly helpful that you gave us guidance to help us understand whether where revenues and expenditures are occurring faster or slower than expected, or as in this case, pretty much about as expected.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Councilmember Haven.
So, yeah, thank you. This is excellent, and it's excellent having it this time of year. So going forth, how do you think the, what, do you anticipate any serious changes to what was expected for the budgeting, given the political landscape over the next 6 months?
I don't have an answer for that, but
I'm
Town
sorry.
Manager Tony, you want to answer that?
I do think this is an important conversation to be had.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Haven O'Donnell. What I'll say is, the good thing is that the town of Carrboro, most of our revenue sources are local. We receive very few federal funds, and so a national election would not impact us, the day-to-day operations directly. We do receive transportation, federal funding, and things like that. And so we'll just monitor any of our federal revenues as time goes on. But right now, our normal operations are all property taxes, as Daryl just showed, and sales tax revenue. And we'll start doing some projections on the revenues. You know, I believe Orange County and other surrounding municipalities are projecting zero growth for sales tax. We've been on the upward curve. But so we'll start really digging into the revenue projections and what that looks like. And we also are going into a revow year. That's going to have a huge impact on our budget. So the goal would be to continue to bring back to you all updates and forecasting so that we can then present a trial balanced budget that you all can weigh in on and make sure your priorities are included in the budget.
I guess the only other thing I would ask is, going into next spring, with the timeline, the budget timeline, how much resilience and flexibility do we have should April, May, we find that we need to make a dramatic shift to respond to some. Exactly.
I think it depends on what the shift would be and what the impact, the fiscal impact would be. We do have a healthy fund balance. Daryl showed that on one of the slides. Compared to our budgeted expenditures, we're doing really well. We did have some huge increases this fiscal year for salaries as an ongoing expense, so we'll have to make some adjustments to rebalance the budget to accommodate that as an ongoing expense. But we can always adapt. So as we receive more information before June 30th, we have to have an adopted budget. We can always make adjustments as we look at, we forecast and predict, what will be the impacts of the budget. So we have time.
Okay. I'm going to keep asking the question. No, seriously, because, should something, and this is the example I gave last June, should we need to respond locally to support, let's just say, faith-based organizations that want to give sanctuary for immigration issues? We don't know. We don't know in what way we'll be called upon to meet the needs of the health, safety, and welfare of our community.
Mm-hmm. We do earmark, I think, a penny to help the human services. I mean, if you have a new priority to utilize the resources from the pot of funds we designate for human services, we absolutely could do that. That would be up to you all.
Thank you.
Mayor, can I say one other thing? I meant to just acknowledge Daryl Keys. He was served as our interim finance director. He held it down, supported our team. He's been promoted to deputy finance director, and he's just doing an excellent job. So I just wanted to give him a shout out for standing in the gap and continuing to rise. We also hired a chief financial officer. His name's Chad Offenberg. He had a pre-scheduled time that he needed to take off, so you will get to meet him at a future meeting. But our finance department is getting in shape, and so just really excited about our team.
Thank you, Carol.
What's up? Thank you, Town Manager Tony. Council members, any other questions or comments for Mr. Keys before he takes his seat? Thank you so much, Mr. Keys. Oh, do we have one?
Just
Councilman
one very quick, thank you, Madam Mayor, and I want to echo my thanks and congratulations to you for your presentation and also all the work you've been doing in town. Being someone who was put into like an emergency, like, here you go, take it on, get it done. However, I get that piece, and I understand how stressful that can be. So huge thanks and congratulations, and I just wanted to express that and say that I'm very proud to have you on our staff here in Carrboro.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Keys.
All right.
Mhm. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded.
I was like, it's quick with it.
I heard a second from Jason? No? Oh, Danny. Okay.
I did second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. We are
That will
adjourned.
forever be my motion, y'all.